Hello, my name is Rhys Jenkins, and welcome to the Neurodifference Podcast. I started Neurodifference to provide society with information about what it is like to be neurodiverse and neurodivergent. From autism to dyspraxia to ADHD, this podcast is about people's lived experience as well as information out there from a variety of sources, from website articles to books to academic journals. And my goal in doing this is to provide a hub for knowledge about anything linked to the lives of those in the neurodivergent and neurodiverse population. A bit about my background. I was diagnosed with semantic pragmatic disorder when I was 3 years of age, mainly to get into a school with a speech and language unit and the support that I needed. My mum noticed that there were different signs that I developed differently to many children from an early age. For example, I didn't speak until I was 4 years of age. My further diagnosis, I was diagnosed as autistic at the age of 16 and dyspraxic at age 26. And those latter two diagnoses were mainly to provide both myself and my family clarity on how I would tackle the biggest obstacles in my life, such as getting a job and getting into university and succeeding in education. My mum, as I said before, my mum noticed very early on that I developed differently to other kids. I hated sand. I could not go on the beach as a kid. The texture of sand was just something that my brain just couldn't process. And as a result, whenever my feet touched the sand, I would scream. Oh, it was horrible. Simply because I would hate the feeling of sand on my feet. And so my mum would put mats down for me to get used to the texture. And if it hadn't been for that, well, I reckon I would have hated sand to this day, which would have been a tremendous shame, given that one of my main ambitions in life is to travel the globe and to see places like the Philippines and the Maldives, especially the Philippines. Oh my gosh, it looks beautiful out there. When we all agree, it looks stunning out there, doesn't it? Another sign that my mum noticed was putting my coat on. I have a gap in my executive functioning skills, a set of skills for getting things done, which meant my mum had to prompt me to put my coat on whenever we got ready to go out and it was raining. Of course, it barely ever rains in Wales, let's be honest. Barely ever rains here. So I didn't need a coat, basically. That wasn't quite the situation. Well, it might have been a little bit. But I'd say the vast majority of my brain, as a 5-6-year-old, was basically telling me rain is not a relevant factor. You don't need a coat. You can just go outside. But you kind of do need a coat, especially as a 5 or 6-year-old, or otherwise you'd be at risk of hypothermia. If there are any 5 or 6-year-olds watching this video, please listen to your parents. If it is cold, please put a coat on. I can promise you, you will need it. Even in a dry, hot country that Wales is. But yeah, no, my mum would have to come up with a prompt for me to put my coat on. She would point to her nose and then point to the coat. Pointing to the nose would be like, Rhys, pay attention to me. I need your attention. And then pointing to the coats showed me that I needed to put my coat on. And that's how I learned how to put my coat on, literally. I guess you could say that I became pretty darn reliant on my mum in maybe a different way to what a 6 or 7-year-old might do. A 6 or 7-year-old might copy their parents and learn via osmosis by copying. But no, my mum had to point to her nose and point to the coats for it to become routine. So how did I become more independent, knowing that a critical avenue of me learning information was by actually being taught by my mum? Well, putting structure and routines in place were two critical avenues. The analytical side of my brain being accelerated in its development enabled me to thrive when it came to education and of course, the installation of said routines. Once I got 100% in an A-level law exam, and I got this 100% simply because I structured my notes on subjects like statutory interpretation and judicial precedent. I know, boring. They weren't boring. I actually find them fascinating. And I structured my notes on those subjects in a certain way, memorized them like a script. And then when I got into the exam room, the atmosphere was very, very quiet. I was used to going into the room itself because I'd been in there for a few exams prior. And that routine enabled me to feel comfortable. Because I was comfortable, I could engage the analytical side of my brain, and the notes just flowed like a river. Making friends in college, though, was a bit of a different challenge. The side of my brain that processes emotion was delayed in its development. I found it difficult to understand non-verbal communication as a result. So understanding and registering body language whilst I was also thinking about what I was going to say was difficult for me. It remains difficult to this very day, I think. After getting my education, I went on the Channel 4 show, The Undateables. A little bit more about my background. I've got a law degree from Cardiff University and a master's in science in autism and related conditions from Swansea University. And after gaining my master's, I decided to apply for the Channel 4 show, The Undateables. And I mainly did it for two reasons. It was an adventure, the experience of going on a date in and of itself. Whether it was filmed and broadcast to the majority of the nation notwithstanding, it continues to be to this very day an adventure. And facing the public, that was the second element. It was a great opportunity for me to raise awareness of how I lived with my autistic brain. It was an interesting and eye-opening experience, a lot of work. One day of filming, we drove to Penbryn Beach, where a scene in James Bond's Die Another Day was filmed. James Bond was a big inspiration in especially my first episode on Undateables. I watched James Bond films from an early age, and what grabbed me most was his ability to just get out of tight spots and defeat bad guys. It was uncanny, as I'm sure many of you would probably know. Anyway, so the crew would ask me a lot of questions around love and what I looked for in a relationship. I have to say those questions, it was as nerve-wracking as the day itself. And it was nerve-wracking because at that moment, I wanted to be as authentic as I could, notwithstanding the fact that it was going in front of, for all I knew, thousands, or as it turned out, millions of people at the end of the day. The entire experience of going on the program, including the dates, was like this. Going in front of the nation was another adventure in and of itself, as was the date. I also wanted to show people that autistic people have an authenticity that is refreshing in dating. Question I often get asked, or I've often been asked since going on 2 episodes in 2017 and 2019. What was my experience like, and did I find love? Unfortunately, I did not find love, but I did learn more about what it takes to build a romantic and close relationship. It was a lot of fun. For me, going forward, the episode reminded me of the importance of how to approach dating. Authenticity, I've barely mentioned up to this point, whilst also having no filter whatsoever. I'll give you an example. On my first date on Undateables, I found out that one of my date's grandparents worked on a James Bond film, and that just sealed the second date for me. It was so cool. By the way, if anybody ever comes on the podcast who's worked on a James Bond film, please tell me your experience. I just find James Bond films fascinating. And for me, neurodifference is about these two things. It's about being authentic and having no filter at all. If you come on Neurodifference, we can discuss anything and everything to do with either the neurodiverse or neurodivergent population, or anything to do with the subjects themselves. My big hope is that it can become a podcast that showcases who the neurodiverse, neurodivergent communities are. I believe that by doing so, this podcast will become one of the main hubs for knowledge for neurodiverse and neurodivergent people. Together, let's make a positive neurodifference in the world.